You might know someone who avoids eye contact with other people on the street, but the second they spot a dog, they are on the ground having a full conversation. Maybe that person is you. You can offer absolute, unconditional trust to an animal while keeping every human being in your life at a very deliberate distance. Or perhaps you recognize this pattern. A relationship is finally going well, the connection is genuine, and suddenly you pick a fight. Or you experience intense rage over a minor delayed text. Right when things start working, your internal system triggers a sharp, defensive reaction. When the dust settles, the story you tell yourself is almost always the same. You conclude that you lack discipline, or that you are simply broken and too sensitive. These reactions are evidence of a highly sophisticated, hyper-vigilant psychological security system. It isn't a failure of character. It is a mechanism operating exactly as it was designed to. Early in life, you learned which behaviors kept you safe and which earned you approval. The psychologist Carl Jung called the resulting structure the persona. It is a protective mask, a negotiated identity built out of whatever materials were available to ensure your survival in an unpredictable environment. Over time, you mistake that mask for your actual self. But the mask is built for defense, not growth. Genuine vulnerability and success inherently threaten this architecture. To your ego, the prospect of being truly seen feels like a threat to its existence, so it sabotages your happiness to keep the old walls standing. You are currently living inside your own protective architecture. To stop the sabotage, you have to look past the mask and find out exactly who is running the security system from the basement. John Bradshaw discovered that when an emotional need goes unmet, the child psychologically freezes at that exact age. Years later, a minor trigger carries the same emotional frequency. Adult reason steps aside, and the frozen child takes control, reacting with terror. Then comes the second wound. You look at your overreaction and feel intense shame. You mock yourself for being dramatic or weak. Without realizing it, you are repeating the exact same emotional dismissal you suffered as a child, deepening the very wound you're trying to hide. We cling to this old pain because we crave permanence. The philosopher Alan Watts spent his life translating a core Eastern insight for the Western mind. The more aggressively we seek security, the more intensely we feel the anxiety of its absence. Watts called this the backwards law. By trying to freeze your fluid, ever-changing nature into a solid identity, even an identity based on suffering, you stay at war with the natural flow of life. You mistake your rigidity for safety. Psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross saw this same pattern in those refusing to move through grief. They quietly decide that continuous suffering is their only morally acceptable response to loss, treating their pain as a form of loyalty to the past. Whether it's a childhood wound or a past loss, we treat our misery as a permanent address. We choose a familiar cage over the terrifying uncertainty of a life where we are no longer defined by what hurt us. If the mask and the cycle of trauma limit us so severely, why do we actively refuse to let them go? Immanuel Kant identified a condition he called minority, the voluntary choice to outsource our thinking to an external authority. Not because we lack the capacity to think, but because we lack the courage. Thinking for yourself brings the exposure of absolute responsibility. It is far warmer to stay in the shadow of a rule, a tradition, or a past trauma, where you don't have to answer for your own life. This is where we deploy the ultimate human excuse: I had no choice. We use this phrase to transfer the moral weight of our actions away from ourselves and onto our circumstances or our history. But as rational beings, we always have the capacity to step back and choose differently. Kant argued that I had no choice is usually a cover for simply choosing the path of least resistance. Staying trapped in the victim narrative is a deliberate act of abdication. We maintain the cycle of trauma because it is the only place we can hide from the crushing responsibility of authoring our own lives. Rebuilding your life requires more than an upgrade to your habits. The current architecture of your identity was built to manage childhood wounds, and it cannot survive the transition to the life you actually want. This necessitates the total dissolution of the protective ego. Reconstruction begins with validation. You stop trying to discipline the panicked inner child into silence. Instead, you turn around and acknowledge that their original pain was real, offering the safety and understanding they were denied decades ago. The second phase is individuation. You must integrate your shadow, the anger, the vulnerability, and the flaws you've spent your life hiding behind the mask. You expand your definition of yourself to include everything you previously rejected as unacceptable. The final phase is autonomy. You accept the brutal logic that you are the sole author of your choices. Every time you act against what you know to be right, you are choosing to be governed by your fear rather than your reason. Shedding the old identity is not a betrayal of your history or the people you lost. Freezing yourself in time honors no one. Living fully is the only authentic tribute available to the life that remains. Stepping into the terrifying responsibility of selfhood strips away your protective armor. It leaves you exposed, but it also leaves you solid enough to finally touch the life you've been running from.